What were the odds? I hadn't seen or heard from her in 10 years. Of course, that's because I had vanished, doing everything in my power to ensure she, her new husband, and her family could never find me, and I had been successful. Yet, there she was, standing at a booth at the very same convention I was attending in Sao Paulo. She even walked right past me without a flicker of recognition. As that thought settled in, a plan began to form. Yes, I can be a real bastard sometimes. Perhaps I should provide some context. You might be wondering why my ex-wife's new family would hate me so much. Well, that's probably because, once upon a time, they were my family too. You see, her current husband is my biological older brother. Naturally, his parents are also my parents, and his two younger sisters are my sisters. When everything imploded, I simply walked away and built a new life for myself. My name is Marcos Almeida. It has been for the last decade. Marcos was my middle name, and Almeida, well, I looked up and saw a billboard for a company called Almeida while scrambling for a new surname. The woman I'm talking about is Beatriz Costa. Back in high school, she was Beatriz Silva. You can picture it, a long, drawn-out high school romance. We were sweethearts. We gave each other our virginity after the graduation party. I was in love with her, and she, well, she was in love with my family's money. A pity I didn't realize it at the time. Yes, my family had money. Mom and Dad owned a medium-sized factory in Campinas. We manufactured electronic components, but Chinese companies were undercutting us on price. We stayed afloat by adding a Made in Brazil label and focusing on a niche market. Small scale, high value, specialized components we designed and built to client specifications. It turned out to be very profitable. A little about my family. There was Mom and Dad, of course, who started the business before I was born. Dad was an electronics engineer. His best friend was a manufacturing engineer. My great-grandfather, on my dad's side, had made a fortune during the Great Depression by lending money to people who couldn't afford to pay it back. When they defaulted, he took their land. In fact, he was known for selling the same plot of land to different people multiple times. Perhaps that explains my family's severe lack of morals. Then there was Bruno, my older brother, whom I've already mentioned. I also have twin sisters, younger than me. They were the babies of the family, the only daughters, and yes, they were spoiled rotten. Their entire perspective on life was simple. If it didn't affect them directly, they didn't give a damn. If it did, they made whatever decision impacted them the least. That probably explains their behavior when everything fell apart. So, in a cascade of cliches, Beatrice and I married right after our second year of university. We were married for 5 years when I came home early one day and found them, her and my older brother, in our bed. To put it bluntly, I was just a stepping stone for her. Bruno was set to eventually take over the family business, while I was destined to remain a glorified worker bee. Sure, I'd technically be second in command, but Bruno would have all the power, the prestige, and the access to high society. To give you a bit more background, Beatrice and I went to high school together in Curitiba, where we started dating our senior year. We both went to the local university, UFPR. She got pregnant at the end of our sophomore year, so we got married over the summer. She dropped out of school to raise the baby, while I continued with my degree. We had a lot of help from my family, since we were both only 20 when we tied the knot. When our daughter, Juana, turned 2, Beatrice started working as an administrative assistant at my family's business, which conveniently had an on-site daycare for employees. I'd always been curious about how she got pregnant, since we always used condoms. None ever broke as far as I knew. She'd had a bad reaction to the pill, so that was out. But, well, these things happen. I did notice a few odd things over the next 5 years. Twice, she had some strange medical issue that prevented us from having sex for about a week. I didn't think much of it at the time. I wanted more children, but it just hadn't happened yet. I was hoping for a boy next. I loved my daughter, but every man wants at least one son to carry on the family name. Yes, I hear all the feminists arguing that a woman can keep her married name, that a father can teach a daughter everything he can teach a son. Yes, girls can love cars and racing just like boys. I get it, but it's one of those things programmed into the male brain. You want a son, an heir. Don't get me wrong, I loved my daughter and was happy to have her. A son would have just been the icing on the cake. Our 5th wedding anniversary was coming up at the end of the week. I had ordered a beautiful set of earrings and a matching necklace from a local jeweler. I slipped out of the office to pick them up, planning to go home and hide them while Beatrice was still at work. I got her gift and then drove home. As I approached the house, I saw Bruno's car in the driveway. That was strange. Everyone should have been at work, and he had no reason to be at my house at that time of day. A sick feeling twisted in my gut. I parked down the street and walked back. The front door was unlocked. I followed the muffled sounds upstairs to the master bedroom, and that's when I found them. Bruno and Beatrice, enjoying themselves. To this day, I don't know how I managed to control my temper. I pulled out my phone and recorded a solid 5 minutes of video before slipping silently out of the house. I overheard part of their conversation. It sounded like this had been going on for at least a few years. Despite the rage boiling inside me, I knew I had to be patient, gather information, and form a plan. Exploding would only cost me more money and humiliation. The divorce laws in this country punish innocent husbands while rewarding unfaithful wives, especially when a child is involved. She would get the house, and I'd get the mortgage. She'd get custody and child support, and I'd get occasional visits. She'd get alimony, and I'd have the honor of paying for her to sleep with other men. To minimize the damage, I had to keep this a secret until I was ready to act. And she was not getting the jewelry I just bought. It took me 3 months to get ready. Now, you might expect me to tell you all the ingenious ways I avoided sleeping with her. You'd be wrong. Beatrice is a beautiful woman, and she's very good at what she does. So I had sex with her as much as I could. Besides, it's not like I was risking catching a disease. She was only sleeping with my brother, not the entire city, or so I thought. The other thing was, if I suddenly started avoiding intimacy, she'd get suspicious. I put on an Oscar-worthy performance as the loving husband and father. I haven't mentioned it before, but I was the IT manager for the company. It was clear the rest of the family thought so little of me that they hadn't even considered that small detail. My team was responsible for all the software, hardware, and programming on every computer and machine in the company. I had unlimited access to anything that required a computer code. I was the only one in the company who had what I call God codes. These codes gave me unrestricted access to every machine the company owned: laptops, desktops, smartphones, CNC machines, 3D printers, Hell, I even reprogrammed the coffee machines in the break room. A little tip: if you're going to mess with the IT guy, be careful with company assets. 5 minutes after getting back to my office, I was reading all of their text messages and emails. And when I say all, I mean all. I started with just Beatrice and Bruno. From there, I discovered that my parents knew too. A text from my mom even discussed it with the twins, warning them to make sure I didn't find out. Yes, my entire family not only knew my brother was sleeping with my wife, but they seemed to approve. You're probably thinking I was on the verge of a breakdown. You'd be right. I really didn't see how it could get any worse. That's when it got exponentially worse. Juana wasn't even my daughter. She was Bruno's. Those two medical episodes I mentioned, the ones that kept us from being intimate, they weren't miscarriages. They were abortions. She had aborted my biological children. She kept Bruno's baby, but got rid of mine. They had to pay. They had to pay dearly. The more I uncovered, the more I planned. Never mess with the IT guy. You might be wondering why they all went along with this. It was simple greed. Bruno was being groomed to take over the company. I would never be more than a shareholder, and a minority one at that, while still running the IT department. They were going to keep me in the dark as long as possible before Beatrice filed for divorce to marry Bruno. Why wait? They needed me to keep the machines running until they could find a replacement. They hoped I would just accept the situation and stay, but they wanted a backup plan in case I left. Plus, I was raising their child and supporting Beatrice, which meant less for Bruno to pay. He could hoard more money to take better care of his wife and daughter. They also planned to never tell me about Juana's true parentage, leaving me on the hook for a lifetime of child support payments. Over the next 3 months, I began slowly siphoning money from our investment accounts into a new one in the Cayman Islands. I sold Beatrice on the idea of taking out a second mortgage on the house to install a huge pool and entertainment area in the backyard. Of course, she agreed. It was something she and Bruno could use, and I'd be stuck paying for it. It took a month for the loan to be approved. I funneled that money into the offshore account as well, occasionally bringing home some design plans I'd drafted at work to show her I was making progress. I even posted an ad online saying we were accepting bids for the job, and we interviewed 5 different contractors. I hired a private investigator to install hidden, high-definition cameras with audio in the house. Everything was recorded to a cloud server that only the PI, my divorce lawyer, and I could access. I continued to copy all of their emails and texts, printing hard copies and storing them in a new safe deposit box I opened at another bank under my new identity, Marcos Almeida. I'm not a stupid person. I knew that when the shit hit the fan, they would be furious beyond imagination. They'd launch a harassment campaign and try to recoup the cost of the damage I was about to cause. So, I created a new online presence for Marcos Almeida, social media profiles, a fake website showing he was a wealthy entrepreneur with an MBA and 2 undergraduate degrees. None of it would hold up to real scrutiny, but it didn't need to. Forged documents are easy to get if you know where to look. An official looking photo, some fake information purchased on the deep web, and a small wire transfer. 2 weeks later, an anonymous package arrived at my office. Never mess with the IT guy. Of course, you can't just trust the words of liars and cheaters. I also ran a DNA test. I collected cheek swabs from Juana while she slept, took a sample from myself, and managed to get Bruno's DNA from a glass he used at a party. I sealed everything and sent it off. I had the results sent to my company email. After all, I was the only one who could access anyone else's inbox. I fully expected them to find that email after I was gone and start their own investigation. So, you can probably guess I was going to destroy Beatrice in the divorce. You can also see that Bruno was going to get burned too. But Bruno wouldn't be that hard to toast. He was a bully, a sycophant, and an idiot. All I really had to do was let him be himself. Once he took over the company, he'd run it into the ground. His ineptitude would guarantee its ruin within a few years. Not only would the company go bankrupt, but he'd become a pariah in the industry for destroying a profitable business. Though I figured I could help him along. First, I decided the family owed me for what they were doing and planning to do to me. So I did what I do best. I created fake accounts, falsified invoices, and slipped a few lines of code into the financial programs. Nothing big enough to be noticed right away, but big enough to hurt when they found it. It was also large enough to support me financially for a very long time, if needed. Marcos Almeida was about to become quite wealthy. The next thing was to build and program the timer for the bomb. It took me a week to construct. No, it wasn't a literal bomb that would cause physical destruction and injury. I'm a computer programmer, not a terrorist. The bomb was a digital one, designed to cause chaos, but only of the financial and operational kind. It was configured to activate under a specific set of circumstances. I could trigger it by command, or it would deploy automatically when certain programmed events occurred. The result would be every computer and smartphone in the company network crashing simultaneously. All computer-controlled machinery would suddenly cease to function. Or worse, they would go haywire. And for the ones that went haywire, the sensitive milling and routing machines, I had a special plan. The day finally came. All right, I know. I probably should have handled it differently. It might have been better, or at least safer, if I hadn't been there at all. My presence gave them an opening to confront me, to hold me there and threaten me. It was a foolish risk, I admit. Still, there's a reason people can't look away from a train wreck. I simply couldn't resist watching it unfold. Besides, I had a plan to create enough of a distraction to escape if I needed to. As it turned out, I didn't. I was standing in the main lobby of the Campinas office when I saw her walk in. She was in her late 20s, dressed professionally, and I have to admit, she was absolutely beautiful. She carried a briefcase with 3 manila envelopes tucked under her arm. That was my cue. Smiling, I walked into my father's office. "What's this?" he asked as I tossed a sealed envelope onto his desk. Instead of answering, I held up a hand, 5 fingers extended. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. I counted down, folding one finger at a time. As I reached 0, a low groan echoed from the factory floor outside. I held up another 5 fingers and began a new countdown. "What the hell?" a man's voice shouted from beyond the office walls. One final countdown. Just as I finished, the bombshell of a woman appeared in my father's doorway. Mr. Nelson Costa? She asked, her voice sweet as honey. Yes, that's me, he replied. She handed him the last envelope. You've all been served, she said crisply. Have a nice day. She snapped a quick photo of him holding the document and was gone. That should explain everything, I said, and quickly walked out before anyone could recover enough to stop me. The letter I left on my father's desk was my immediate resignation, citing a hostile work environment. The grounds were based on the fact that company management and ownership not only accepted, but actively encouraged the affair between the company president and the wife of one of their managers. Of course, Beatrice was served with divorce papers. Bruno was served with a lawsuit for creating a hostile work environment and alienation of affection. I was also suing him for back child support payments, as well as future support for the children. I had already removed all my personal belongings from my office a few days prior. I had also quietly cleared out everything I wanted from our house. All financial matters were settled too. The divorce would grant the house to Beatrice, so I emptied most of our joint savings account. My lawyer had power of attorney, allowing him to act in my name without my presence. When the door closed behind me, Miguel Costa died, and Marcos Almeida came to life. That was the last time I ever saw any of them. Over the next few years, the court ordered couples therapy, but my lawyer had no idea where I was, and I certainly wasn't telling him. The motion was dismissed. I was ordered to pay child support, but my lawyer presented the evidence that the child wasn't mine and that they had deliberately deceived me. My lawsuit against Bruno for his share of the support was successful. Beatrice tried to get alimony, but since I was no longer employed and she was now earning more than me, my lawyer politely refused any such payments on my behalf. As for the house, my lawyer filed a quitclaim deed, telling her she could have it and whatever assets remained inside. Bruno moved in with her before the week was out. As for me, I moved to the coast in Florianopolis. Bruno had to pay me a few $100,000 for creating a hostile work environment. The judge did not look kindly on a boss having an affair with an employee's wife. The company settled for about 2 million rise once evidence proved they knew about and encouraged the affair. All told, between the lawsuits, the money I'd siphoned, and the savings and investments I took, I walked away with just over 4 million. Yes, she was legally entitled to half the savings, but good luck finding me or the money. I waited about 6 months after all the lawsuits were settled before I finally triggered the bomb. It fried the servers and rewrote the code for the sends machines. Financial data was lost. The machines began producing products that were wildly out of spec. It took them 2 weeks to fix it. 2 weeks of zero production, which threw their entire schedule into disarray and caused them to miss multiple deadlines. I ended up starting my own IT consulting firm, using an offshore LLC to keep my name off the books. I did very well. 2 years after I left, I was involved in a traffic accident on the BR 101. It was bad enough to require significant facial reconstructive surgery. I decided to use it to my advantage and modify a few features I'd never liked. I'd always thought my nose was too big, so I had it made smaller. My chin was a bit weak, so I had that corrected. Just a few minor alterations. I'd always hated my chin, keeping a beard since I was 18 to hide it. Now, with it reshaped, I started shaving clean. With just those small changes, I looked like a completely different person. But the transformation wasn't just superficial. I was also in much better shape. I had always been fit, but not exceptionally so. A few hours at the gym each week were more about maintenance than anything else. After the accident, I had to go through rigorous physical therapy, which led me to more serious weight training. It was tough at first, but I soon found it made me feel better, and I started to look better too. My previously flat stomach now sported a six pack. My chest, legs, and arms grew toned as I added muscle. I went from a standard office worker to a confident, chiseled man. The accident, by the way, was entirely the other driver's fault. He was high on drugs, had been driving for too long, falsified his logbook, and was operating a poorly maintained truck. I ended up owning his trucking company after the settlement. I immediately instituted new safety rules and fired 5 drivers. The company's reputation improved, and we landed more business. I met with regulators from the DNIT and outlined my improvement plan. Once the insurance company saw what I was doing, our rates dropped. It wasn't long before my new policies became known, and our reputation for being on time and safe soared. So, between my consulting firm, the trucking company, and a string of good investments, I was doing very well for myself. And now, for the first time in 10 years, I was looking at my ex-wife from across a room. Old feelings of betrayal and anger began to stir. I had cut them out of my life, yes, but they were never truly punished for what they did to me. I never got my revenge. That's when a wicked plan began to form in my mind. I would hit them in the exact same way they had betrayed me. It was obvious Beatrice didn't recognize me. She walked right past me, looked me directly in the eye, and gave me one of those smiles a woman gives a man she finds attractive. It wasn't overtly flirtatious, just an unconscious acknowledgement. This was going to be fun. I knew her desires, her motivations. It was just a matter of using the right bait, and I had the perfect lure. A thought struck me. I pulled out my phone and checked the date. Yes, perfect. My plans expanded to include even more destruction. I just needed to convince her it was safe. I casually approached the trade show booth where she was working. I had no use for anything her company offered, but she didn't need to know that. I started browsing the pamphlets on the table, feigning interest. "Do you have any questions about our products or services?" a familiar female voice asked. I looked up, pretending to see her for the first time. "Actually, I do," I replied, "but I'm afraid I don't have enough time right now to get all the information I'd like. I'm interested in a few products and anticipating a need for a large supply of each. Unfortunately, I'm on my way to a meeting." "I understand. Could you come back later?" "I won't be free until about 7 this evening, and I think the exhibition closes then. Here, let me give you my card. I'll be at my hotel tonight, so just give me a call, and I can meet you somewhere to answer all your questions." The prospect of a large order had her hooked. Now, to set the hook. "How about I make a dinner reservation at Fogo de Chao for 7? It's right here in the hotel, and I hear it's one of the best steakhouses in the city. You can meet me there, and we can discuss what your company has to offer." I deliberately glanced at her left hand. "And you can bring your husband, too. It is a business dinner, after all. And here's my card. I'm Marcos Almeida, owner of Almeida Industries Limited. I have a few different businesses that could use some of your products." Her smile widened. She probably knew nothing about me personally, but she was well aware of Almeida Industries. I could almost see her eyes turn into dollar signs. Then she gave my tailored Hugo Boss suit a quick, appreciative glance. "That would be wonderful," she said. "However, it will just be me. My husband couldn't make it on this trip." "All right. Would you like to invite any of your colleagues to join us?" I could tell she had no intention of splitting a commission. "Unfortunately, they'll all be busy. It will just be me. I'm sure I can answer all of your questions." I gave her a broad smile and walked toward the exit. I had no meeting to attend. I went back to my presidential suite to prepare for my revenge. After showering and shaving, I put on another Hugo Boss suit. I couldn't wear the same one. It would undermine the image of immense wealth I needed to project. When I arrived at the restaurant lobby, Beatrice was already there. She had clearly gone to great lengths to impress. Her little black dress had a plunging neckline and a hemline that rode high on her thighs. She wore 5-inch heels, and the deep V-neck made it clear she'd forgone a bra. I couldn't see any panty lines where the tight dress hugged her body. Forget dangling the bait in front of her. She was letting me feed it to her by hand. This was going to be so easy, it was almost boring. Over dinner, she expertly answered all my questions, explaining why her products were superior to the competition's. We discussed costs and quantities, and I made the appropriate noises about being impressed. I told her that when we were ready to place the order in the next couple of weeks, she would be the one we'd call. The truth was, I had no use for her products, and even if I did, I'd buy them from her biggest competitor. I suggested that since the night was still young, we could head to the nightclub next door for a drink. She was more than happy to agree. I'm fairly certain that while she was getting ready, she had taken the opportunity to look me up online. It would have confirmed that I was every bit as wealthy as I appeared. The way she clung to my arm and pressed against me as we danced, I couldn't help but wonder if she was thinking of trading up again. After drinks and several dances, we were in my suite. No, she wasn't drunk. She knew exactly what she was doing. She was the one who suggested it. I could see the dollar signs glittering in her eyes. And I had discovered, while we were sitting in the club, that she was, in fact, not wearing any panties. "I'm not on the pill," she breathed, kissing and nibbling my neck. "Don't worry," I replied smoothly. "I had a vasectomy. I'm allergic to latex, so I can't use condoms anyway." "Okay," she agreed, a little too quickly. She probably should have given it more thought, but I was doing my best to distract her. We had 3 rounds that night. I deposited every last one inside her. The next day, she moved all of her things into my suite. We did it every night, at least 3 times, each time ending with me inside her. Some nights, it was 4. Then, on the last morning of the conference, she finally asked, "So, is there a Mrs. Almeida? A fiancée or a girlfriend?" It was obvious my left hand was bare. I had been wondering when she'd get around to it. Now, I could have a little more fun. "I was married for a few years," I said, looking off wistfully. "But we separated. We just grew apart. We were so young when we married, and inevitably we divorced. I haven't found anyone else yet, but I'm looking. I think it's time for me to settle down. And, well, I would definitely like to see you again. I'm quite drawn to you. It's not just because you're a fantastic lover. I also enjoy our conversations and simply being in your presence. But what about your husband? The fact that you're married could cause some problems if we were to start seeing each other full time. We're really just roommates," she said. "At this point, we don't even sleep in the same room. I can't even tell you the last time we were intimate." Before I truly invest in a relationship, I told her, I need to sort out several business issues. I'll be traveling a lot over the next few months. I'll get in touch with you when I'm done, if you're still available. After 2 more rounds of sex, we cleaned ourselves up, packed our bags, and left the hotel. She went her way, and I went mine, with the promise that we would keep in touch. I tore her business card into pieces and tossed it in the trash as I prepared to board my plane. The following Monday, I contacted a security firm I kept on retainer. Their task was to closely monitor Beatrice and my old family for at least the next few months. Contrary to what she had told me, she and her husband were far from being just roommates. The security company managed to place hidden cameras and microphones inside their house. The feed was full of them, having sex 3 or 4 times a week. Yes, it was illegal as hell, but this firm was very good at getting information, and I needed specific intel. One thing I discovered was that, surprisingly, Bruno was completely faithful to Beatrice, at least for now. I couldn't say for sure about the past 10 years. He also wanted another child, preferably a boy. I also learned they had a ritual for the night before one of them traveled. Each would try to exhaust the other with sex. That made me smile. 2 months later, I received the final piece of news I was waiting for. I watched the camera footage as she tidied up the living room for Bruno's return from work. I saw the reveal when he walked through the door. "Congratulations, Daddy. You did it. I'm pregnant again." He was stunned at first. Then his face filled with pure joy. How? How many weeks?" he asked. "About 2 months," she replied. "It must have been the night before I left for that week-long conference in Recife, or the night I got back." Apparently, she still believed I was sterile. She called and left me a tearful message, saying she and her husband had reconciled. She couldn't run away with me now. It made me laugh. After that, I had the security company remove all the cameras and stop their surveillance. I could get the rest of the information on my own. I set a reminder in my Outlook calendar for a few months later. 9 months after the conference, to be exact. I was checking the birth announcements in my old hometown of Curitiba. There it was, a picture of Beatrice holding a newborn, a smiling Bruno looking over her shoulder. By then, I had completed the management transition for all my companies and was now looking at the online photo from my ranch in Florianopolis. No, I wasn't going to be locked away here forever. It was just one of the places I owned around the world. Besides, I was no longer Marcos Almeida. Good luck finding me. The name was just a pseudonym they would soon discover never really existed. It was time to finish my revenge. I switched to a new Gmail account I had created just for this. It had been 2 weeks since little Mateus was born. I'm still not sure how I convinced Bruno to name him that, I thought to myself. No, I had no illusions that Marcos was actually the father. Marcos had a vasectomy. He was shooting blanks. He even showed me the medical report. Bruno must have gotten me pregnant either the night before I flew to the conference or the night I returned. I just wanted to name him Mateus, a secret reminder of the fantastic week I'd had. My husband was thrilled to finally have a son, but lately, he's been acting a little strange, ever since a few days after the birth. I'm not sure what's going on, but something isn't right. I had just put the baby down for a nap. Juana was in her room, probably texting her friends. I was about to start making dinner when the front door was thrown open with a crash. "You unfaithful whore!" Bruno screamed at me. "How many times have you cheated on me?" My heart stopped. There was no way he could have found out about Recife. Okay, sure, I thought. I had started to consider trying to hook Marcos. Bruno had a lot of money, but Marcos was far wealthier. But when I found out Bruno and I were having another baby, I just couldn't leave him. What are you talking about, Bruno? I've never cheated on you. It had been over 9 months since that conference. There was no way he could have found out. At least, he couldn't have any proof now. He threw an envelope at me. It was then that I noticed his parents and his twin sisters had followed him into the house. I managed to catch the envelope before it hit the floor. Who the hell is he? Bruno demanded. Bruno, I have no idea what you're talking about. About 2 weeks ago, he seethed, I received an email with a link to a website. It showed a bunch of videos of you with some strange guy while you were at that conference in Recife 9 months ago. It also suggested I get a DNA test for the baby. It said there would be some surprises there. And what a surprise it was. I found out I'm not the biological father. He took several deep breaths and continued. I want to know who Mateus's real father is. Bruno, you are his real father. That's when I opened the envelope. It was the result of a DNA test. It stated that Bruno was not the father. Well, actually, it said there was only about a 40% chance he was the father. Mateus carried some of the DNA that Bruno carried, but there was other DNA that neither of us possessed. See, Bruno, it shows that you and Mateus carry the same DNA. It doesn't say that, he roared. It says he only carries part of the same DNA at best. It says I would be an uncle. He stopped talking, a very strange expression on his face. Oh my God. The scream came from my mother-in-law. It can't be. Of course, there might be a slight resemblance, but Marcos couldn't be. Miguel, the DNA doesn't lie. Bruno was definitely not the father, but he was a close relative of the real father. There were no other male relatives close enough to be a match, except for Bruno's father, and I had definitely not slept with my father-in-law. Marcos was the only other man I had slept with, and I realized that week had been my fertile period. I was in absolute shock. Suddenly, my thoughts started racing. Miguel was a genius with computers. How hard would it be for him to fake a medical document? Then I remembered those 2 miscarriages. Both times I had accidentally gotten pregnant by Miguel. I had purposely avoided having children with him. Now, in the cruelest of ironies, I had just had his son. I had cheated on Miguel with his brother. Now, I had accidentally cheated on Bruno with Miguel. He knew, I screamed. He knew, and he did it on purpose. What are you talking about? Bruno asked. I didn't recognize him. He looked completely different from how he had 10 years ago. Yet, I'm sure he recognized me. He knew exactly which buttons to push. He knew exactly what he was doing. He seduced me. He told me he'd had a vasectomy. He even showed me the medical report. My cycle is as regular as a clock. He must have remembered that I would be at peak fertility that week. Oh God. He must have remembered I'd had those 2 abortions and avoided having his children on purpose. Well, screw him. He sued me for child support for Juana. So now I'm going to sue him for child support for this bastard. Just as Miguel Costa had vanished before, Marcos Almeida no longer existed. The child support lawsuit went nowhere. You can't sue someone who doesn't exist. Bruno and Beatrice ended up staying together. He would have been forced to pay child support for both Juana and Mateus until they graduated from university. He would also have had to pay spousal support, the mortgage on the house, and at least half of all his assets. It was cheaper to keep her. They stayed together, but their relationship was permanently shattered. They now lived in a loveless marriage, having become nothing more than roommates with benefits. They still had sex occasionally, but it was just sex. There was no love left. They were just two people meeting their needs. They sold the house and quietly separated as soon as Mateus went off to university. Don't worry about little Mateus. Sure, he wasn't his Uncle Father's favorite, but he was still a cute, happy baby. His grandparents still spoiled him, and his mother's maternal instincts were strong. It was decided never to reveal his true paternity. Bruno had always wanted a son. They never had any more children. As for me, yes, I remarried. We have 3 children, a boy and 2 girls. I dote on them constantly. Every now and then, I think about my other son out there. It would be nice to visit him and have him in my life, but that's simply not possible. Perhaps after he turns 18, I might consider discreetly approaching him. When his mother and Bruno finally pass away, he'll have a surprise. He's included in my will. As for my parents, I sent them 4 anonymous emails. The first said I had gotten married. Obviously, they weren't at the wedding and never met their new daughter-in-law. The other 3 emails were to inform them of the births of their grandchildren, whom they would never see. That was my revenge against them. I heard they spent a fortune on private investigators looking for me and my children. Good luck with that. For those who think I didn't get enough revenge on the rest of my family, keep in mind that when I dropped my bombshell, they lost a lot of money. Their company was never the same again. The only thing that ever mattered to them was money, and that's what hurt them the most. As for the twins, I can only say that their lifestyle was severely impacted, something that undoubtedly affects their lives. So, you probably think I'm a real bastard for what I did. I won't argue with you about that. Just keep in mind what they did to me. I think I deserved a little payback. My brother betrayed me, so I betrayed him back. She refused to have my children when we were married, preferring my brother to be the father of her daughter. So I tricked her into having my son while she was married to my brother. If that's not justice, then I don't know what is.